Things began to change about the time Rowan County was 10 years old. At that point, England had a new king, George III, and he had new ideas about what to do with his 13 American colonies. England had just acquired Canada and India in the French and Indian War. To pay for this new empire, the British imposed new taxes upon the American colonists. Many became angry because these taxes were imposed without their consent. In Boston, rioters were fired upon by British soldiers. The event became known as the Boston Massacre, and news of it spread all the way to the Carolinas. The more the colonists protested, it seemed, the more the British clamped down. And the more the colonists got angry because they were facing taxation without representation. Rowan residents got riled up as well. They were as prone to protest as the folks up in Boston, and they too got fired upon. To understand this, we have to take up a part of North Carolina history called the Regulation. This was a period in the 1760s when the citizens of North Carolina protested new taxes imposed upon them by the British government. Back then, North Carolina ranked last among the 13 colonies in the amount of business it did. In fact, the other colonies pitied Carolina since it did not have a prosperous seaport like Philadelphia or New York where trade could grow. Since the king needed more money, and since trade was what he taxed, the king sent a smart young governor to North Carolina to change things. William Tryon is best known as the builder of Tryon's Palace in New Bern. Tryon wanted a fancy building that would say North Carolina was as good a colony as any other. He also wanted to intimidate North Carolinians into being more loyal to the king so they would pay all the new taxes. The folks around Salisbury weren't just the only ones to be concerned about Governor Tryon and his policies. Folks everywhere in Rowan County worried about corruption. They often found that when they went to the courthouse to register their deeds, they had to pay excessive fees. Sometimes it was 2-3 times as much as they were supposed to. I'm here in what was called the Jersey Settlement back in colonial Rowan. It was considered then the finest farmland to be had. These folks felt like they were being cheated, and they and their neighbors all across this area began to try to change government and change the way the British ruled Rowan. While things seemed to be going very well in Rowan County for Governor Tryon, the case was not the same to the east in Orange County. Twice during this period, regulators marched on the county seat of Hillsborough and rioted and closed down the courts to keep public officials from collecting taxes and debts. The regulators were particularly angry at a public official named Edmund Fanning. He had been an early lawyer in Salisbury, and he had become the clerk of the court and the colonel of militia in Hillsborough. That meant that if he cheated you on your land deeds or your court case, he still could be the man who could come and have you arrested. Fanning had several times arrested the leader of the regulators, Herman Husband. Husband owned a farm in the Uwharrie Mountains and had also been active in the politics around Salisbury during the times of the Troubles. One of the reasons that the regulators rioted was to free Husband from what they thought was an unjust arrest. The violence, however, convinced Governor Tryon that he had to take action, and he declared martial law throughout the colony and began to march to Hillsborough. At the height of the tensions, regulators actually marched on Salisbury. They met with local officials and demanded that, quote, they disgorge their unlawful fees, end quote. Public officials were very rattled by this. They promised to investigate and to pay the money back. While Governor Tryon was marching on Hillsborough, things got pretty tense around Salisbury. Colonel Waddell, who commanded some loyal militia from Charlotte, came through Salisbury, crossed the Yadkin River, and marched up to here, the Jersey Settlement. About 2 miles that way, he was met by a huge group of regulators commanded by Colonel Benjamin F. Merrill. He soon turned around and went back to Salisbury. The rest of the regulators had positioned themselves between Hillsborough and Salisbury. Governor Tryon soon marched down the road and encountered them at Alamance Creek. After some negotiations, Tryon ordered his militia to fire upon the regulators. Since half of them were too poor to own guns, they soon fled. Tryon then continued his march towards Salisbury, burning barns and arresting people as he went. Tryon's army camped in front of what is today the Rowan Public Library. There, more than 4,000 Rowan citizens came to seek a pardon from Tryon. Not all the regulators were pardoned. Captain Benjamin Merrill of the Jersey settlement was taken back to Hillsborough and ordered to be executed. Before he was to be hanged in front of his wife and children, he pleaded with Governor Tryon to make sure that his farm was left to his family so that they would not suffer. Tryon agreed to this, and Merrill was executed as one of the regulator heroes. Some Rowan regulators were luckier. They escaped with their lives. One was Robert Wood. He was arrested by justices of the peace and put in jail. In August, after the Battle of Alamance, he was brought before the county court, and he refused once again to, quote, take the oaths of allegiances tendered to him in the time of the late rebellion. The court put him back into jail. The attorney who charged him was John Dunn of Dunn's Mountain. Some North Carolinians later would claim that what the regulators did was fight the first battle of the American Revolution. To oppose unfair taxation and to stand up for your liberty was something that all Americans would begin to do in the years of the 1770s. In a sense, people like Benjamin Merrill were like the Minutemen at Lexington and Concord in 1775. North Carolinians would become part of this entire struggle to create the American nation.